Drainage. Drainage is the natural or artificial removal of surface water and subsurface water from an area with excess of water. The internal drainage of most agricultural soil is good enough to prevent severe waterlogging, anaerobic conditions that harm root growth, but many soil needs artificial drainage to improve production or to manage water supplies. The process of urbanization results in many areas being modern. The problem of floods that often hit the city is due to the lack of a drainage system, and it is too small and shallow. A large amount of water causes water to overflow out of the ditch, causing flash floods. The mission of floods problem is in the state of Selangor and the federal territory of Kuala Lumpur in 2021. How bad the current situation? Several floods in Selangor and Kuala Lumpur until almost all the vehicles belonging were damaged and destroyed. Houses were destroyed and even killed in a flood accident caused by ineffective drainage system and deforestation for the purpose of establishing urbanization. Cause and effect. The impact of the unsatisfactory drainage system in Selangor and Kuala Lumpur caused several floods, which also had a negative impact on the community where there was no shelter due to the floods. Many homes were destroyed by the water storm and then due to the wrong
cleaning the gutter regularly can prevent clogging. Check the gutter directly and make sure they are not congested directly. Blockage can be one of the factors causing clogging because the water does not flow smoothly. If it rains, then the rainwater cannot flow to the other place, causing flooding. Therefore, it is important to make sure nothing happens in the gutter. The current action, the Department of Irrigation and Drainage Malaysia has need to HLA consultant to conduct a drainage system master plan study and deploy relevant government agency to widen and deepen drainage system, provide flow reservoirs and provide high capacity pumping system. The government must also ensure that the National Security Council (MKN) is ready to provide trainer resources so that in the event of a flood victim can be evacuated safely. To prevent from the happening, if you live in the flood-prone area, it's a good idea to build your house higher than the road by a meter or so. This is to prevent flooding from entering the house. Another thing you can do is raise the socket higher on the wall so that the water does not conduct electric if floating into the house. Long-term solution is forest conservation is a good way to deal with flood. Forest can be used as a catchment area that can absorb rainwater from continuing to flood the earth. Forest can function as a coral by absorbing rainwater and flowing slowly into the crack. Creating a small garden at home can prevent flooding. The lack of green area, especially in urban area, make a flooding worse. Trees have roots that function to absorb the water. If there are not trees, rainwater cannot be absorbed into the soil. It's causing flooding. Planting plants not only to prevent flooding but can also make a home beautiful.
Who should be involved? Both Department of Irrigation and Drainage or DID and the appropriate local authority are responsible for drainage. In general, the local authority is responsible for the construction and maintenance of the local drainage system, which is mainly of trunk drains and secondary drains. The ID is responsible for the rivers which may flow within and outside the local authority areas. Floodings caused by choked drains and culverts fall under the responsibility of the local authority. Floodings caused by overspilling of drains and rivers due to inadequate capacity is normally the responsibility of DID. In case of long-term government effort, first, introduce reforestation around low-lying flood-prone areas to regulate water flows, act as barriers against storm surge, and protect against erosion and mudslides. Second, introduce new market-based incentive for restoring degraded forests and increase the penalty for illegal logging. Next, regularly clearing solid pollutants that clog drains and rivers. Next, increase the carrying capacity of rivers and drains, either widening, deepening, or boats. Next one is government create a flood plan along the river to increase the water carrying capacity. During monsoon season, the flood plan could become a sacrificial piece of land to protect inhabited areas. In contrast, the flood plan could act as a water-dense, fertile agricultural land where villagers could plant vegetables to generate their economic livelihood during non-monsoon seasons. And next is install simple custom-designed surveillance Internet of Things modules at designated spots along the river. They can consist of pollution detection sensor, a camera, a microcontroller, a transmitter, and a rechargeable lithium battery to prevent the river from clogging. And the last one is create awareness campaign and education programs to promote a better understanding of environmental issues, especially disasters. Difference between Japan and Malaysia drainage. Every summer, Japan is battered by heavy rains and typhoons. These storms cause extensive damage and loss of life. Among the most impactful in recent history was the 1959 A7 typhoon, which resulted in more than 5,000 deaths. For decades, Kasakabe consisted mainly of farmers' fields, which meant that any damage incurred by a flood was relatively minor on the national scale. But toward the end of the 20th century, Kasakabe became more urbanized and heavily populated as Tokyo expanded. As one of the most seismically active countries in the world, Japan has long been accustomed to investing in protection against natural disaster. The Jiken storm drain was built with the capacity to drain 7,000 cubic feet of water per second. This water is then pumped away from homes and businesses and into the Edogawa River. Meanwhile, in Malaysia, poor maintenance of drains and irrigation canals has reduced the flow carrying capacity of the city's drainage system, triggering flash floods during thunderstorm. As long as drains remain clogged, with more debris dumped in the flow system and with heavy rains persisting, the problem of flash floods will occur. Urgent remedial work is needed to alleviate the situation, but there has been no improvement for years, and the public is largely apathetic until there is a flood. Bad weather and heavy rain are expected to persist well into these months, before a respite and the southwest monsoon, which will last between May and September. Thus, in Malaysia, surface drainage is the diversion or orderly removal of excess water from the surface of land through natural channel or constructed ditches. With the application of surface drainage, water accumulation can be prevented and avoiding the issues such as mosquito breeding and soil erosion. As the conclusion, lastly, rather than purely relying on government effort in mitigating flood issues, all Malaysians must do their part not to throw any rubbish into the drain or river. The government could upgrade the existing drainage system without further delay and reduce the number of flood victim deaths and and property damage. That's all from us. Thank you.